This is another Read Me Something reward for Reich E. Spore's Patreon. We are reading from my Oz-based novel, Polychrome. Chapter 38. Grasses and tough brush grew here, at the border between the northern edge of the Gnome Kingdom and the land of Eve. I watched as a small contingent of gnomes assisted the Pingaree's workmen in opening the crates they had brought here a few weeks ago, according to my instructions to King Inga. Calico and Zenga watched with some bemusement. "What is this that you have my men assembling, Lord Erik?" Calico said finally. "My ticket across the deadly desert," I answered. "The barrier makes it impossible for the gnomes to tunnel across. I can't fly by myself, and no fairy magic would get me across and through the barrier. As it's about 200 miles of desert, walking is out of the question. It's not all that bad here, a few hundred yards out, but the magic that makes the deadly desert so deadly intensifies everything. It's like the Sahara with toxic sand. The magic part of the destroying sands won't hurt me, but some of the toxins are mundane. So I needed a mundane way to cross the desert. Fast, low-tech enough that I could get it built here, and it had to be something I could use. So I took a cue from both Clive Cussler and from Baum himself. I grinned as I saw the mast being raised, making the nature of my solution clear. Zenga clapped her hands in understanding. "A sand boat!" Calico and Ruggedo grunted with surprise and appreciation. "An elegant solution in some ways, but have you any idea how to handle such a craft? Your world is filled with automated metal conveyances." "Ask Zenga," I said, "or old Inkerblue. I learned to handle a small sailing boat when I was much younger, and the seamen of Gilgad gave me quite a refresher course." "Good enough, then," Ruggedo said. "But tell me, why from here? The prevailing winds, as you know, are due east from here. If you began 100 miles or so further south, you could run "Good enough, then," Ruggedo said. "But tell me, why from here? The prevailing winds, as you know, are due east from here. If you began 100 miles or so farther south, you could run straight before the wind and arrive in Oz as swiftly and surely as any might hope." He gave a nostalgic grin. "That was, after all, the course my tunnel took. If you run straight with the wind from here, you'll miss Oz entirely. You'll need to tack somewhat southerly to strike land." "You're entirely correct, Ruggedo, but the usurpers know these things as well, and while they haven't had tremendously good luck following me, they certainly know I'm coming for them. So where, exactly, are Ugu and Amanita going to deploy most of their watchmen and troops?" Understanding dawned on both gnomes' faces. "Along the border of the Winky country, most concentrated at Oogaboo and points immediately south, where the domain of the gnomes and Oz are at their closest." "Exactly. As I have no intention of charging straight into their most heavily armed troops, I am going to sail along the northern border and then cut south, landing in the Gilligan country instead. This should be less heavily guarded. Their magic cannot, after all, track me directly, so they'll have no idea, even if they guess my intent, of knowing exactly where along that border I will land. And it is a rougher country overall, so they'll have a harder time redeploying. Once I'm there, all you need do," Calico finished, "is drop that gem upon the soil of Oz, and the rainbow will span the distance from here to there. My gnomes will cross, and they will be joined to the top by Iris Mirabilis' forces. Within a few minutes, an hour at the most, our armies will be assembling in Oz." He turned to Ruggedo. "Well, Ruggedo, you've told me of your adventures since exile, and they're quite impressive. Penitent. I, on the other hand, have become an able administrator, but not so experienced in the outside world. I am therefore appointing you commander of our armies." Ruggedo's jaw dropped, and he stared at Calico for a long time. "But I am an exile no longer. I exiled a petty tyrant and a selfish, short-sighted man who had imperiled the entire realm. I do not see much of that man in you, and I have spent, quite deliberately, most of the past few weeks in your company. For you, exile has served to bring you to the maturity your kinghood had denied you. Not like General Goof, alas." Rigido's eyes were suspiciously bright. I thought I saw a trace of a tear at the corner of one. To preserve a bit of the old gnome's pride, I asked, "What did happen to Guff, then?" "I exiled him shortly after Rigido, when I discovered he was actually trying to arrange a coup against me. This did not have the salutary effect on him that it appears to have had on my old king. He cultivated his grudge against me assiduously, assisted many attempts to invade or exploit our lands, and eventually offered his services and knowledge to the usurpers." Oh, that's bad. That's very bad," Rigido said gravely, only a hint of roughness in his voice indicating that he had been very near tears at Calico's sudden lifting of exile. "Guff was an ambitious and prideful gnome, no doubt of it, but he was an excellent strategist and tactician, not to mention a cunning negotiator. I suppose his ultimate goal was to become one of the usurper's viceroys, taking over the gnome kingdom when they finally moved against our people." Zenga snorted. "If half the stories I've heard are true, his ultimate goal would be to turn the usurpers against each other and take Oz itself from them." "Yeah, good luck with that," I said. "Still, that probably means they've got themselves a good general to coordinate things. Another reason for me to make sure we get to assemble and move as an organized unit far away from where they've got the bulk of their forces. With luck, we might be able to cut a swath straight south through the Gillikin country and hit the former Emerald City before enough of their armies can redeploy to stop us. Take out Ugu and Amanita at the capital, and the whole thing may be finished." "A fine thought that is," agreed Rigido, "but I doubt we should plan on it." "No, but we should at least have surprise and position on our side when it starts." The assembly of the little craft was nearly complete. It was about 30 feet long and had a beam of about 8 feet, with a long outrigger on either side to balance it. The boat was designed with an aerodynamic shape that should minimize resistance. Instead of wheels, which would have been my first choice, the Pingarees had built narrow skids coated with something shiny that Zenga said was called Seafary's Kiss. It made the areas it was coated with extremely smooth, very hard, and resistant to wear, and in water repelled things like barnacles. I ran my finger along the skids and was astonished. The stuff felt so slick it was like moving an air hockey puck over the table. There were a few bare areas at intervals on that and the rudder and hull to provide good contact for control and steering. The boat was longer and somewhat higher than it would have been in normal circumstances, but I had to make sure it'd keep me reasonably high off the sands, out of the concentrated level of toxins. As it was, I was taking with me several masks crafted by the gnomes, which should filter out incidental poisons and stray sand grains, but they would be for emergencies, not constant wear in the 100-degree-plus heat. Now the gnome soldiers that had accompanied us began the quick loading of supplies onto the sand boat. I had no idea how long it would take. With luck, I might average 20 miles an hour when moving, given a brisk wind, which would mean it would take probably 30 to 35 hours of sailing to reach my destination. Unlike a watercraft on the ocean, though, I couldn't afford to just lash the rudder and take naps when I got tired. There were potential outcroppings of rock, the small vessel would likely be temperamental, and there were rumors that something lived in the desert where nothing should live. So I'd have to sail only when I was awake and alert, stopping whenever I couldn't pay attention. "Figure it'll take me a week to get there," I said finally. 8 hours of concentrated sailing a day will be more than enough in that heat. "A week is a good time," Calico said. "That will allow me to assemble the armies underground here, ready to emerge at a moment's notice, and prepare all the supplies they must bring with them. The war engines, especially, will take some time to bring up." The last jug of water was placed on board, and the last gnome jumped off. I walked to the bow of the little ship and took up the pot of paint I'd requested. Zenga looked momentarily puzzled, then brightened. "Of course, no ship must go unnamed." "Bad luck, at least that's what I've always been told," I agreed. I looked up in the sky where, far off in the distance over Eve, the massive white and gray anvil of a cumulonimbus drifted. For a moment I allowed myself to imagine I could see a faint glitter, as of the towers of a mighty castle in the sky. And now I take a single ship to throw back the invaders of the greatest of the lands of Faerie. I painted the name carefully. The paint dried unnaturally swiftly, as I wasn't allowing my true mortal nature to interfere. Yes, it's the right name. May this one fare better than the first. Zenga, would the Princess of Pingaree do me the honor of christening my ship? I found it amusing the word christen was used here, even though there was hardly any Christians in evidence in the fairy realms. With great pleasure, Lord Erik. Zenga took a bottle of wine from Calico, who apparently had arranged to carry just about everything he might want with him, and drew back her arm, reading the name inscribed on the bow before speaking. May the spirits of air guide you, may the strength of earth uphold you, and may the will of the above protect you. In the name of Fairy and the above, I christen thee Thunder Child. The wine bottle shattered perfectly, spraying sparkling shards far and wide, and for just a moment I thought I heard from the far-off cloud a low rumble. I will believe I did, anyway. Perhaps he's watching somehow. Here I go, Iris. Zenga put her foot on the boarding step, and I caught her arm. No, Zenga. She blinked. But Lord Erik, I am more than enough a resident of Fairy so that you cannot pass the barrier, I said firmly. You might just be blocked, in which case neither you nor I would enter, or the barrier might kill you. Either way, you have to stay. I looked out at the gray-brown, desolate expanse. I have to do this alone. Slowly she stepped back down. Then, before I could react, she darted forward and kissed my cheek. Good luck, Erik Medon, she said, and stepped back quickly. I was momentarily thrown completely off. Then I took a deep breath. Thank you, Zenga. I swung myself up to the little deck and prepared to unlash the sail. The gnomes braced themselves against the stern and pushed. Thunderchild slid smoothly across the grass and gravel and onto the level, lethal sands. I stood up and waved. A cheer went up from the 20 or so gathered there, and Rigodo raised his staff in salute. I bowed and then let out the sail. The wind caught the light, strong material instantly, with a pull so strong that even with the tackle assisting me, I was almost pulled along with it. The boom swung outward, and Thunderchild began moving, picked up speed. I reached back, adjusted the rudder. A gust of wind and angles to the main breeze momentarily tilted the little sand boat, and I shifted my heading a few points. Thunderchild was a good little craft, but it still took me some time to get used to her handling. I kept some of the sail reefed in until I could feel confident that I knew what I was doing, and what I should do if certain emergencies were to happen. Eventually, though, I felt sure I could handle her well enough, and looked back. The dark ridges of Ave and the Gnome Kingdom were still visible, but the low border between sand and safe land had already vanished. I was alone on the deadly desert. Well, I said after a moment, raise the curtain for the final act. I turned back to the bow and let out all sail. Thunderchild lunged forward, hissing over the deadly sands. Traces of acrid fumes tickled my nostrils, made me squint even more. This was the most dangerous part of the entire journey, at least up until that part where I had to let myself get stabbed, anyway. If the toxins and irritants triggered the wrong reaction, I might end up a victim of the deadly desert, my true mortal nature useless before my own body's asthmatic fury. But there was no other choice. I was the only one who had a chance to pass the barrier. Aware more than ever of the threatening tightness in my chest, I turned Thunderchild fractionally northward, keeping myself heading due east. Together we flew towards the setting sun, trailing a lethal cloud behind.